must begin by saying that I think the financial and critical failure of the house that Jack built should be taken as an encouraging sign, even if I must also confess that I'm a huge fan of this very troubled film, and its even more troubled director. Lars von Trier and a few other filmmakers became hot properties in America in the early 2000s because of the way they toyed with audiences, the way they indulged their cruelest impulses and then lifted up a mirror and laughed, as if to say, aha, but who is the real monster? This fictitious character I invented to outrage you, or you who sits and watches him? It's a cinema centered around a question no more sophisticated than one kid asking another, do you want to see a dead body? The encouraging thing, I think, is that Lars von Trier arrived at a form of confessional excitement, a way to turn his neuroses and hang-ups into blistering performances, arch technique, and productive leitmotifs. He knows that the work he did for cinema, when he was a younger man, has bled into the culture, and it's no longer enough to simply shock people, because you can. Directors like von Trier have had to evolve, but how do you evolve with a movement you started but can't control? Von Trier's The House That Jack Built has the earnest nature and operatic finality of a swan song, one last plea for understanding, thrown at an audience that's put up with his every whim, bad joke, and provocation for over 30 years.
Sadistic, but in your eyes, probably a masterpiece.
No, more than a masterpiece. An icon.
Speaking personally, it hasn't always been easy loving von Trier. For every legendary performance he directs, there's an on-set report of his hideous treatment of an actress. For every unforgettable image, there's an unforgivable moral underpinning. And for every great idea, there's a middle finger of a gag waiting to suck the life out of every narrative development.
Chaos reigns.
Von Trier just can't help himself, it seems, but the public could. The House That Jack Built wasn't released in many countries, and though one-night-only screenings of the slightly gorier director's cut sold out, it made about 1/10 of its budget back after all the receipts had been tallied. And for every critic who thought it was a masterpiece, 10 others found it repugnant and masturbatory. And I recognize that it's a little cute to say that's the point, but, well, so just what is The House That Jack Built? Composed like a painting and written like a novel, it's a horror movie and a preening deathbed confession.
What was it one's mother used to say about not getting into cars with strangers?
Well, I wouldn't know what your mother said.
You might as well be a serial killer. I'm sorry, but you do kind of look like one.
Would you like me to drive you back to your car?
No. I'll take care of myself.
It's von Trier admitting to every one of his critics that they're right about him. He's every awful thing they've always accused him of being, and for every explanation he has ready for why he's misbehaved his whole life, on and off screen, he has a counterpoint that reminds him all his justifications are a coat of paint on an electric chair. His fate has been sealed, so to speak. Everyone knows exactly who he is and who he was, and in an era with much tougher standards about a male artist's conduct than the one during which von Trier came of age, his legacy is going to be tough to sift through. After all, his movies were never universally beloved to begin with. What The House That Jack Built asks is, was it worth it? Was everything he did to his actors and his audience worth the films he made? Is any work of art justification enough for what artists put people through? The House That Jack Built is one final attempt to get a word in about his intentions and how seriously he did take his craft, even if it looked from the outside like he was constantly in it just to prank people. There are vignettes about his methodology.
Art is many things.
Very convenient and unusual in the pile of bad excuses. But all of that is of no interest whatsoever unless you are an engineer.
I am an engineer. My mother was of the opinion that becoming an engineer was the more financially viable choice. But my really big dream was to become an architect.
His compulsions, his heroes.
Did you understand, or even better, did you accept the connection to your own personality? That you, yourself, were a psychopath?
Well, I'm not stupid.
Flag across 3 foot face full of black soot.
other complicated and problematic men who came before him, and paved the way for a perpetual enfant terrible like Von Trier. The film is jackhammer blunt and deliberately offensive, and doesn't have the benefit of a female point-of-view character to soften his misanthropic edges. In fact, he's chosen leading man Matt Dillon very carefully, because Dillon was once the prettiest starlet in Hollywood, and for the first time he looks as old as he is, and uncomfortable in his skin to boot. He wears Von Trier's tarnished reputation on his face.
Now, may I?
No, not without a badge.
Bravo, bravo, bravo. That's excellent. That's exactly just the type of response we like to see.
You say no? That makes my day.
Right.
Of course, everybody's always talking about security, but what is actually anybody doing about it? No is quite the correct answer. Yeah, it's quite the correct answer indeed. Of course, you never allow somebody into your home just because they say, oh, I'm the police officer. No, you don't do that.
No.
You wait until they show you the proper...
Badge.
Yeah.
His crimes are those of a pathetic man who recognizes that by virtue of a few traits, namely that he's a white male, he can get away with unspeakable things. Jack is obsessed with the idea that his crimes be seen the right way, that his story be read the way he wrote it. And you can sense here that Von Trier has many a filmmaker's number who has come out of the woodwork looking to provoke and found themselves castigated for the transparent neediness of their stated dangerousness. Maybe it's the Danish director trying to have his cake and eat it too when he reveals that all this pontification on the nature of creation and technique are the last things his hero will say before spending a richly deserved eternity in hell. It's as if he's admitting that the pointedly and purposely nihilistic and air quotes edgy work he'd become known for wasn't enough to sustain either his career or his enthusiasm for the craft of filmmaking. It's as if he sees that his kind of work is out of fashion, no longer the box office and awards draw they were once seen to be, and that everything he thought justified it is just the entrance exam to pandemonium, the last more of a comment than a question ever uttered. All this to say that in order for the film to work, Jack and Von Trier's twin repulsiveness has to be taken for granted. But what do we learn that we couldn't have already guessed? What may wind up being Von Trier's most important gift to his audience is a reminder that whatever crazed, self-aggrandizing stunt an artist thinks they're going to pull to stoke censors and crack monocles and get banned, it's all been done before. Von Trier admits it by casting many familiar faces from his past work, and also by casting as Jack's tour guide through the antechamber to damnation of venerable German actor Bruno Ganz.
May I ask you something?
I can't promise I'll answer.
Right, that's exactly what I meant. Are you allowed to speak along the way? I was thinking there might be rules.
Put it this way, very few make it all the way without uttering a word. People are overcome with a strange and sudden need to confess on these trips. And not all of it can be said to be of great rhetorical quality. But do carry on merrily, just don't believe you're going to tell me something I haven't heard before.
Ganz was the beatific face of art house curiosities, the gentle angel or the hunched demon, the man who seemed to look right into we lucky few in the audience and say, I know what you're going through. I've been there too. Everything will be okay. If Ganz looked like he had seen it all, it was because he had, on screen at least. He'd worked for giants and masters, acted opposite rare talents and rarer landscapes, done every sort of film and never lost the ability to gently hold the hand of the viewer and help them through a film or an emotional moment.
Isn't that the meaning of adornment? To enhance the beauty of the beloved is to acknowledge both her frailty and the nobility of that frailty. We announce to the darkness that we will not be diminished by the brevity of our lives, that we will not thereby be made less.
Ganz listens with a little bemusement as Jack tries to recast his crimes as misunderstood masterpieces of avant-garde art. and dismisses the assertion. What could you show a character played by Bruno Ganz that he hasn't already been through?
Do you hear a buzzing sound?
Yes? And I don't think you want to know where it's coming from.
I want to know everything.
For thousands of years, human beings have tried to localize hell. Among other methods, by seeking the sound it generates. One shouldn't focus on extracting screams and wailing, because the cries of pain of so many millions of individuals together becomes what you've just heard.
Ganz passed between the release of the 2 cuts of the house that Jack built, and in his wake lay a roster of roles that would make any actor jealous. Famously, the perfect angel, and finally, a devil. And whichever he was playing, I'd like it very much if I were to be greeted by him when this life is over. His presence in this movie carries the weight of experience. There's nothing in this film you can't see elsewhere and frequently. Yes, it's true that ideas von Trier once used to gross out and scandalize millions are now passé. Just one more part of the landscape. But in attempting to sort out what he'd done and why he thinks he did it, he managed to create this gorgeous hobgoblin of a video essay. If you're still shocked, perhaps he's still needed. But what bastion of unacceptability is there left to reap when our culture venerates and objectifies serial killers? When true crime is a genre run largely by amateurs who just want to get close enough to real carnage to reach out and touch it? Von Trier may have been among the first people to ask our culture if they want to see something they can't unsee. But he didn't make it into a cottage industry. One that has since eclipsed him. The time of men like Lars von Trier, who prod us and poke us and demand we be outraged, is coming to an end. Because as Ganz could have told us, you can't simply disturb people forever. With this film, Lars von Trier has pulled the curtain on at least one phase of his career, if not the whole thing, and left us with a heartening idea. It's time to keep going forward and find something new to say. But I'm grateful for the doors he broke down, and I'm happy for the films he left behind.